welcome you. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of the Finance and Council Controlled Organisations Committee, the first one of the triennium. It seems a long time ago since the election. There was no public forum and there are no apologies. We are all here, so that's good. I'd like to move from the Chair and confirm the agenda with the following changes: that in regard to Standing Order 21.1, Option C, regarding speaking and moving to amendments, Option C be adopted. And we're going to remove, as signalled on Friday, item 10, changes to the Constitution of Dunedin City Holdings. Moved. Got a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Staines. I'd like to, any discussion? Put the motion. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you. Now, declarations of interest. I'd just like to remind you that declarations of interest are here, and has anyone kept them updated? But are there any changes? No. And that. I'm going to say something, Councillor Vincent-Pope, no? In that case, I move that the committee notes the elected members' interest register and confirms the proposed management plan for the elected members' interests. So, all those in, I need a seconder. Yep. Councillor Vincent-Pope. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That also carried. Thank you. Now, Mr. Logie, item 5, the financial report. I just also mentioned that the next item is a 6-month report and this is a 7-month report, so probably, unless you've got specific questions, we can ask them all this one. So, anything you'd like to preface the report with? Councillor Walker.
Yep, thank you for the report. Just one clarification, I guess being new to council, what is civic assurance, unbudgeted dividend from civic assurance?
So we have, I think it's a 7.5% shareholding in Civic Insurance. What happened was that they owned a building in Wellington, which they sold, and the proceeds of that building were distributed to the shareholders, of which we got 325,000 for.
Any other questions? Oh, I did have a couple of questions. One I was just going to ask, in the CapEx, I don't know if it's really right asking you, Kevin, because it's not necessarily your department, but I'm just thinking about the CapEx on page 26. There's a number of places where at the moment we're just running a wee bit lower than our budgets. Not a massive amount, but do we know, are we still aiming to try and spend 124.9 million to the end of the year?
At this stage, the current forecast looks like we'll probably be more around sort of the 110 mark. There's some property projects that are on hold. Obviously, the Mosgiel Pool is still in the development stage, so some of those things obviously won't happen before year end. So about 110-ish.
So what are the implications in terms of some of it will be borrowed money that we will be borrowing for, and some of it will be just money that we've rated for? So what's the implications?
Most of it will be borrowed money. So what we'll do is that as part of the annual plan follow-up, we will present the CapEx for the 2020-21 year, and obviously we'll take into account any underspend that's occurred in the current year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Elder, did you have a question?
I do have a question. I note on page 2, under grants and subsidies revenue, we've got 24.625 million and also 675 for subsidised transport. And I was just wondering, in the light of Queenstown getting 60 million through the infrastructure fund and the number of grants available out there through the tourism infrastructure fund, PGF, etc., whether in fact, and I've queried this before, we should have someone who specifically works in grants, or how do we increase our grants budget?
So in terms of the financials, this is just our standard NZTA funding. Obviously it includes our renewal program, but also specifically the peninsula. In terms of the wider question of what other money could we access, it's probably more of a question for ISCOM, potentially. Is that something?
Yeah. Talk to that. Like, so the Queenstown grant was that being working on a piece of work for the last 2 or 3 years now about their transport network, and so if we were more advanced in shaping future Dunedin transport, then we would have been probably up in the line for some of that funding as well, but our program of works wasn't as advanced this reason, so they were shovel ready.
Yeah, I was just thinking generally, actually, you know, because there's a number of grants out there, tourism infrastructure, and a number of grants under that, and I just see, I suppose I'm Scottish in background. I would like to see us really going hard and having a vision to appropriate some of those funds for projects and enable us to, I suppose, subsidise great things to happen. And I suppose one of the things that has happened was the Port Chalmers to Dunedin, which is wonderful, but there could be other opportunities like that. For example, Oamaru to Dunedin, could that not be?
Yeah, well, there's a number of them, and I think we have done reasonably well in the past. We've got the $20 million from the Growth Fund. There is 500k from the Tourism Infrastructure Fund to the Tunnel Beach car park and stuff. My sense is at the moment there's more of a staff capacity to deliver things, and there is a funding issue because there's George Street, Waterfront Bridge, renewals and
Yes.
and my nervousness would be if we get more funding, that would just require more people or reprioritisation of projects
Staffing.
to deliver.
Yeah.
more.
Okay. Just a query, because
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank
there
you, Councillor.
seems to be a bit floating around.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, we try and keep questions to the reports, but Councillor Geary, you had a question?
Yes, just two very specific things. On page 30, under occupancy costs, I noticed the final one is around additional security and cleaning expenditure related to the operation of the municipal lane toilets. Have you got any further information at all, Mr. Bowden?
No detail other than it is an additional cost. There's also additional security work in the park space as well. So it's probably a lot of it's to do with compliance, making sure that we're meeting the health and safety rules.
Thank you. And my other question was around page 32. Under corporate services, most of those items are pretty self-explanatory, except for the final one, mobility solutions. Do you have any detail around that, the underspend? What hasn't been done?
Sorry, what
Page 32, under corporate services, capital expenditure.
Oh, yeah, so what that is we're currently in the process of rolling out a mobility solution. So part of that is to do with building services. So we've only just recently appointed a contractor to deliver that project, so it's just a delay in getting that contractor in place.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? On page 29 it says that Three Waters revenue was unfavourable by 420k due to mainly to water sales being less than expected. Can you just expand on what we sell? You know, how we sell our water, like is it bottled water we sell to private companies or what? Can you just explain that?
So it's the delivery of water to the commercial community, so places like factories, etc. So
Okay,
it
so
would have been, I mean, our biggest client previously was Cadbury's, but obviously
Right.
with Cadbury's coming out, that obviously has an impact on our income, so it is the corporate commercial.
do we
premises.
sell to companies that do bottled water?
I don't believe we have a bottled water plant here, I couldn't tell you, sorry.
You don't know if we sell to anyone who bottles our water and sells it?
I'm not sure that we have a bottled water plant in Dunedin, so.
No, I mean, I'm just wondering if anyone like that buys our water.
No.
No, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? The Mayor moved to indicate willing to move. Seconded Councillor Hall. Would you like to speak to that? Any other speakers? I'd just like to make one comment, and that is if you look at page 22, in the right hand corner, the borrowing metrics, I just thought this is quite an interesting piece. So, and I haven't seen this, is this new in there? Yeah, interest as percentage of rates revenue. The LGFA target is that we pay less than 20% of our revenue in rates, and we are actually only paying 6.8%, although we had budgeted to go to 8.1. Interest as a percent of total revenue, less than 25, we're paying 3.8. Debt annualised revenue, they say you can go 175% of your, is it your rate take or your total budget? Total revenue. We're at 87%, and that include, and with the stadium debt included, it's 118. So I just feel that they're figures that perhaps don't get out in the public very often, but we are well under at this stage all the guidelines. So with that, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No, recorded please.
That's what recorded against, and it's still passed. Thank you. Now, item 6, which is the financial period ended 31st of December. Now, as I indicated, this has been completely superseded by the last report, but it's only in there so you can see what 6 months looks like. So I'm happy to move it from the chair, but if there's any questions first. Oh, I've got a seconder with Doug actually, so any questions at all? Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's passed. Carried. Thank you. Now, item 7, the Waipori Fund. Mr Davey. Would you like to preface this report with any remarks, or take it as read?
Yes, I can make a few comments. The September and December quarters of 2019.
Sorry, pull your mic a wee bit closer.
Thank you. The September and December quarters of 2019 were strong quarters for the fund. The fund gained 3.64 million in September quarter and 0.74 million at the December quarter. Since then, equity markets have been volatile, and the fund performed strongly in January, but there's been volatility in February, which will impact the fund returns in the short term.
Thank you very much, Mr Davey. Any questions of that report? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Davey, for a very robust report. I have a couple of questions, one particularly. On page 47, and I guess throughout the report it refers to the breakdown of the equities that we hold, primarily obviously Australia, internationally and in New Zealand. Has it been the practice of council previously to have a breakdown of what equities we own, and if so, can we get that?
It hasn't been previously distributed, but it can be, and we can provide that.
And I guess a follow-up question would be, and I guess sort of in the context of what's happened recently in the share markets, would you say, somebody who oversees the Waipori Fund, that you are generally comfortable that the companies within the portfolio that we have are well leveraged? And what's your position on that?
The fund's assets and asset allocation are weighted more toward fixed interest and property equities, which make up about 55% of the fund, with equities about 45%. And the stocks that the fund is invested in tend to be income generating stocks as compared to growth stocks. So the asset allocation will assist the performance of the fund, given what's happening currently.
Great, thank you. And to say it would be good, therefore, to see the breakdown of the stocks we hold. As agreed previously, it would be great to have an analysis of what we hold in the fund. Thank you.
Sure, we'll do.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm willing to move that report from the chair, and Councillor Walker is willing to second it. I'm happy to speak to it briefly. If you look on page 48, you see the graph, and you can see in 2009 through to 2013, well, can't quite see if it made 13, but there was a period where the Waipori Fund had gone below where it should have been with inflation-proof adjustment. And if you look at it where it is now, it's sitting above that point, so that's actually quite a good space to be in view of the type of coronavirus environment or whatever that we are in at the moment. And The other comment I would just make in relation to your question, Steve, Councillor Walker, is that there has been previous decisions that we will not be involved with certain sin stocks and tobacco and landmines and fossil fuel and things like that. So, not that I think fossil fuels are sin stock, but it's not in the traditional sin stocks, but it's not in our portfolio. So, yeah. So with that, I'm willing to speak to that. Sorry. Any other speakers? Councillor Vanders.
Thank you very much for this pleasing report. It's nice to have such a positive ray of light in the financial issue, and the 7 mil that we're getting from it is very, very welcome, especially when you look at some of the other figures around. You've suggested that we can't hope to perhaps have such a positive result because of current changes, and I think we all accept that. But as Councillor Lord has pointed out, we have had now a number of years of very reasonable returns from the Waipori Fund. I'm entirely supportive of keeping it that way, and also making sure that we do continue, which we didn't always, to stay within the inflation adjustment provisions that are actually set out in the deed of the Waipori Fund. So thank you very much for that, and for the money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vanders. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a point of clarity, my request to see the breakdown of stocks we held was not actually to get an understanding of their ethical status. It was more to get an understanding of their long-term status in the context of recent events.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Yep. No. And I wasn't drawing that in either. I wasn't assuming that's what you meant. I thought you might have been just trying to get a free breakdown of policy for your own investments. But any other speakers? Okay, with that I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 8. Keith and Gemma, is it? Oh, sorry, Gav. Yep, sorry. Dunedin City Holdings parent financials. Any statements you'd like to proceed to report with, Kevin?
Probably just for the newer members of council, we present these sets of financials once a year. It's the parent financial, so it's the Dunedin City Holding Company, Dunedin City's Holdings Company on its own. It's a requirement of the statement of intent. Obviously, this is the first finance and CCO meeting we've had in the triennium, otherwise we would have presented it significantly earlier.
Any questions of the report? Well, I'll ask one given. Page 55 of the report, total term loans as at 30th of June was $19.8 million, or $6 million lower than budget. Now, can you, just for the information, there may be some new councillors that don't understand why the holdings company would have debt. Is this the money that was borrowed in previous years that we shouldn't have really tagged on to companies? Can you explain that?
It is money that has been borrowed previously to fund the operation of Dunedin City Holdings.
Yeah. Now, would it be fair to say that just a few years ago that was 38 million, so that's come down significantly in the last 3 to 4 years?
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Walker, question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the report. It alludes to page 67, item 10. It's just like I get a bit nervous when I see the word routine. In the last sentence, it talks about Aurora.
Sorry, can I ask you?
Page 67,
That's
item 10.
That's the next item on that.
Is it the next report?
Is that item 9?
Are we not on item 9?
No,
Oh,
right.
forgive me.
You're forgiven.
Next.
I can do small, so it's not.
Thank you, forgive me for that oversight.
So no other questions on item 8? Councillor Staines is willing to move. Councillor Hall is willing to second. Any discussion on the report? Well, I will just say on that, I'm very pleased to see that total debt term loans at 19.8 million. That's a significant drop from when I came to council a few years ago. Councillor Vanders.
Acknowledging the drop, I think we need to acknowledge the lack of dividends for 3 years now, the lack of dividends into the foreseeable future, and the parlous state of Aurora, Delta, and depending on how you look at it, even City Forest, the others not having a significant financial impact in my view. I continue to have a deeply concerned view of the runnings of Aurora and Delta in particular. Those are where the big money is. We have had some decent returns out of city forests, but it's very hard to tell what the real return of investment is there, because the cutting rate basically determines how much money comes out of those, and obviously the cutting rate's been up a bit lately. In terms of looking forward, DCHL has Aurora as its main company with potentially $100 million worth of extra debt required to keep it floating every year for the next 3 years. Delta, with no dividend and no real hope of an awful lot happening there either. City Forests, although it did give us a reasonable return last year, we've got logs backed up all over China. We've got, as a result of climate change, masses of Siberia that are now being cut at rates that make us exporting logs uncompetitive. So what I'm saying is that we need to be aware that DCHL is not in the foreseeable future going to be able to give us returns on the very considerable investment that we have in them and the ongoing running costs. So, warning shot over the bow. Aurora, Delta, City Forests, and the previously break-even and very service-oriented rail issue is Taieri Gorge Rail is also going to be impacted by the dramatic drop in tourist numbers. So for anyone contemplating spending or getting anything out of our companies for the foreseeable future, I believe that we have serious issues that have not been addressed in the past, are still not being addressed now, and that the ongoing prognosis for DCHL is one of throwing millions at companies that are simply not going to give us a dividend. So I can't vote against this particular executive summary. It is what it is, and it's just the DCHL part. But they basically represent our companies, which we used to get a return from, albeit at considerable maintenance, neglect extent, and which I now see largely as liabilities. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to suggest that we need to be extremely careful about spending on account of what used to be sources of income and now basically sources of liability. Thank you.
Just before our next speaker, Councillor O'Malley, I'd just like to point out that I just want some clarification on this. You made a statement that for the next 3 years the debts for Aurora will increase by $100 million a year. Was that correct? The group debt for DCHL is budgeted to increase $100 million every year for the next 3 years, and I've circulated a graph regularly about that. Yeah. Now, I'll just make a comment that if that's the case, I did hear you right. So that is not because of Aurora, though. Aurora's debt is picked to go possibly a maximum of another $150 million, I think is the figure, based on current debt. And the rest of that spending is this council spending what they are spending to do the variety of jobs that we put in our long-term plan. So I'm not disputing the figure, the debt figure. I'm totally convinced you're probably right, but it's not solely to do with Aurora or mismanagement. Of
no, I totally agree, and thank you if I gave the incorrect impression. But it is a group debt that is going up at an unsustainable rate, and we can't rely on the companies basically helping us out in the event that there's an interest rate increase or someone, perish the thought, might think about ever paying it back.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor O'Malley.
I just want to follow up on Councillor Vandervis's comments. I think if you make a statement that $100 million to keep a company going, that implies some sort of operational expense, whereas this is more of a capital expenditure expense. And it reflects the fact that the council took too many dividends in the past from these companies, and it was forecast that they are not going to pay dividends to us to recoup that us bleeding them too hard earlier on. Commodities-based companies like City Forests, they do fluctuate up and down, but as an asset base, it's a massive sort of massive base. And I can remember 15 years ago people talking about the wall of wood that was going to come and absolutely devalue these forests and make them worthless. So, you know, the idea that they will or will not have value it's very hard to predict what the value of a commodity is going to be from year to year. But I have a feeling that, you know, we know what Aurora is going to be doing, and I think to just keep bringing it up each time is not helping with our understanding of our assets, I feel, because we know what the issue is with Aurora. It's not going to pay a dividend for a while it recovers. But it's got its debt, it's an eternal debt, and to keep glomming the two together is an issue for me as well, because it gets confused with the ratepayer thinks that they are individually and absolutely exposed to that debt, which is they are responsible for its ultimate paying if it fails, but these companies is not going to fail. So therefore, to keep talking about the sky falling is in fact creating a position, an assumption and an appearance of calamity that I don't think exists. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. Councillor Geary.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to follow up what my colleagues just said. Calamity is a good word. As I was listening to my colleague a couple of minutes ago, my immediate reaction was it sounded like we should all shut up shop and go home now. And I don't believe that's the case. We've just had a report on Aurora that put to bed issues, conspiracy theories, and told us that we are on the right path. Are there challenges? Of course there are. Are there challenges with other companies? Do we have a challenge in the current coronavirus setting in terms of our city forests? Of course we do. But it is not the end of the world, and we have the right people in place and the right plan in place to guide us through this in a responsible way. What we should be doing is looking at that and affirming that, not going back over past history which has been laid to rest, and to be confident about the pathway we're on.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, in that case I'll put the motion. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Against? That's passed. Thank you very much. Now, item 9, statement of intents. Mr Cooper, Mrs Adams. Welcome to the chair. Welcome to the table. Would you like to speak to these for a start, or? Thank you.
Just briefly, the statement of intents are supplied here on the back of last year's financial outcomes from the companies, acknowledging that they're yet to complete their budgeting rounds for the coming year. So we have this ongoing challenge that we have their SOIs here are mismatched in terms of their timings of their actual budgets. So they're a placeholder, they're their best estimates based on where they've seen the figures over the recent few months. It predates coronavirus, so there's no account taken into account for that and any market movements for any of the companies. So the figures are like many budgets, often go out of date before they hit the radar. In particular, these sets of figures will be out of date pending the final figures coming forward in June, which is based on the company's signed off budgets from each individual company. So noting that, it's becoming quite clear that some of the companies will be affected by coronavirus. It's possibly going to be more of a timing issue for some, but equally it will be lost revenue for others. That will be embraced in the budgeting round when we supply the final SOIs in June. Probably worthy of noting too, debt levels when you put all these SOIs together, coupled with Council's expenditure program, we do start to get up towards the debt levels which we forecast. So in 2020, the 927 cap, when we have to come back to Council, we will be doing that based on these forecasts, and equally out in 21-22 when we forecast to get to that 975 cap, we are heading in that direction. So we just note that again, that nothing's gone away. The original forecasts are holding strong. Whilst we have reduced company borrowing levels to a degree, equally Council's picked up that slack. So net, it's as we originally forecast.
Thank you very much, Keith. Any questions? I would just remind councillors we do have a workshop on the 31st on statements of intent. So there will be a workshop. Councillor Walker.
Now we're on the right item. I think I've probably indicated what my question is going to be. It was on page 67, item 10. Just need some clarification around the 5 million of routine operational requirements set out by Aurora. Could you just give me some examples of what routine operational expenditure in that context 5 million might be?
There has been a request, which we might as well deal with now, around the thresholds for companies, and the wording around that is pooled assets. Once we got into this, we put that on hold pending the workshop and giving us some more time to work out how to craft words to ideally deliver what the essence of the requirement was, but also keep the company operational. So it does hinge around, if you look back at the sentence now, it talks about transaction, sorry, it doesn't talk about transactions, it talks about assets of 5 million or more. It doesn't actually point to over what time period or is it per transaction. For the record, it's always been read by us and the companies as per transaction, and that's how it's been utilised and applied in the past. The suggestion around pooled assets in the case of Aurora, we believe would be particularly unwieldy because they would, given their spending circa 70 odd million a year, 80 odd million a year, they will regularly potentially breach that 5 million, given that pool of assets, if it's pooled, it's going to mean any block of assets, so arguably the monthly capital expenditure program would have to be approved, and I don't think that was the intent. The intent, as if you recall it correctly, it was around acquisitions of another company, another forest, another network, those sorts of things, as opposed to their day-to-day operational requirements. So where we're heading here is potentially carving out the fact that they've got an asset management program which has a 10-year horizon, it's all documented and published, to say that 5 million acquisition, whatever the words may be, excluding assets covered within the asset management plan, which are generators, towers, whatever it may be. Substation down in Carisbrook was 35 odd million. So there's operational versus acquisition of other companies, I think is where we're trying to get clarity around.
That's a very comprehensive answer.
It's a comprehensive challenge.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Hurleyhan, you have a question?
Thank you. And some of that might have been covered in Councillor Walker's question. I'm not 100% sure on that. But my question is around where it says that council will be the sole shareholder, but it also says there is a clause in there that they can have other shareholders if there's permission. I'm just wondering how often they have offered shares to anyone else who is not council.
Sorry, Councillor Hurleyhan, are you on item 9?
Oh, sorry, page 67.
Is that page? This is the next item, isn't it?
Is it?
No. I thought you were on the Constitution, sorry. Yeah.
Where it talks about how the council is the only shareholder, and then it says that there's, maybe I could have completely misunderstood this, but that's the way I read it and I wrote down notes on it, but was it said that in some circumstances, if permission is given, they can have other shareholders. I've written down page 67, but maybe I put the wrong. Matters of substance affecting companies. Weeks. Do you know what I mean or not?
We've got different page numbers.
Oh, it might just be, yeah, I'm not sure. But, yeah.
I think the answer is that at any time we could elect to sell. We don't have to wholly own any company. And so that would be, like for example, when we look at the statements of intents of the railways or the airport, so we only own, is it 72.3% of the railways, and we only own 50% of the airport. So that model, I mean, we could sell half a city forest but still keep it as one company if we chose to. It's those decisions are sort of up to us a bit as council, I think. So I'm not sure if you've found.
No, I can't find it.
Oh, sorry. No.
Don't need to be sorry. Finished with the questions now? Hang on. Councillor Hawkins next, then O'Malley, then Vandevers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Worship.
It's been a while since we've had this committee meeting, isn't it? And
Last
thank you
time
to
we
the two
were
of you
mayor.
for coming. My question is around the DCHL statement of intent and under strategic objectives. It's on page 6 of 132 of our appendices, but where it says to promote and support the DCHL Group Company's contribution to Council's strategic framework and climate change and carbon neutrality initiatives. And that conversation has become far more focused in recent times due to subsequent decisions that Council have made around where our ambition sits for the city. And I've got no issue with this. It's more when you go through and read the SOIs for the individual companies, it would be fair to say that this ambition is reflected, how it's reflected sits on a spectrum. Some, the airport company are very ambitious, and others it seems entirely absent. And I just wanted to flag this in advance of the workshop because this might take some tweaking, but it will be helpful to get a greater sense of alignment in the ambition in the subsidiary and associate companies where it's possible. Is that manageable given the timeline, the statutory timeframes we have around signing off the SOIs in this financial year?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor O'Malley.
It's back to the $5 million statement. Is one of the issues, and I think which brings up with the workshops, is just to bring to the workshop, is it one of the issues is also you're talking about an absolute number where the companies are quite different in size. So 5 million would be a big investment for Dunedin Railways, but obviously a very small investment for Aurora. So would we consider potentially looking at that, instead of having an absolute number, call it a percentage of capital assets or something like that instead?
Dunedin Rail does have a different threshold. That could be one solution. Ideally, we want to make some suggestions around wording to what it does capture or doesn't capture, but there could be another threshold in there as well.
Councillor Vandevers.
I'm wondering what the real value is in having $1 million limits on purchases or transactions. If those transactions can be cut into pieces, or if, as has happened in the past with the stadium seating and Jacks Point Luggett, for instance, where the limits were plain and the limits were plainly just overshot anyway without any repercussions. In the case of the stadium seating, there was a $1 million limit that was overshot. In the case of Jacks Point Luggett, a $10 million limit that was overshot and misrepresented in terms of who had actually bought these properties. I'm looking at recent information we just have from City Forests, where a farm has been bought, or it looks like it's been divided into 2 farms for $7 million. But it's divided into 2 transactions, and you're saying, as I understand it, that you consider the per transaction view to be within the limit, when in fact it's a $7 million transaction of farmland and land on the same road. So what really is the point of coming to council if you can basically just put these things into separate transactions anyway, despite the fact that for all intents and purposes they're the same farm?
Councillor Vandevers, I think you're talking about reports that perhaps shouldn't be in public, but that is exactly the answer to your question. That is why someone's coming to council.
Why?
That's why if a transaction is thought to be breached,
yes,
that's why they come to council. So we just won't go any further down that line of questioning at the moment.
Oh, I'm not talking about a proposed transaction, I'm talking about one that's already happened.
Okay.
And the information that we have on that. And what I'm saying is that if you are going to view your limits as per transaction and you have the ability to divide up these purchases into smaller transactions, is there really any point in having these limits of purchases that have to come to council?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we never divide up any transactions. At various times, opportunities have arisen and they're being divided up by the vendors. So So we're only responding to the opportunities, whether they be one or two transactions or multiple transactions. So it's not at our choice how they're presented to the market. From my definition of a transaction, if it's a separate vendor, separate parcel or a separate opportunity, that would denote a transaction legally. So this is not of our making, it's how people are choosing to market their properties.
So in terms of the limits, and we've had various limits over the years, I just quoted 1 million, 10 million, we're now talking about $5 million limits. What actually is the point of coming to council with these larger transactions?
Because we're required to.
Is it a legal requirement under your SOI?
Under the SOIs, yes.
And what are the consequences if you don't adhere to, as has happened in the past? I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about years back. What are the consequences now if those SOIs are not adhered to?
That would be entirely in your hands.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. I think I have a number of questions on the SOIs. First one is on city forests. Well, it's not really on page anything, but I guess it would be on page 36. My question is basically under the goals and objectives, and it talks about market diversification. I couldn't find any mention of the potential to move into the very fast growing world of bioproducts. I think it's the fastest growing sector now in forestry. I think it's worth something like 4.6 billion in Canada, for example. So are you aware of any desire on the part of the board to investigate this sector of the market?
No, I'm not, but we're happy to take that feedback.
And my other question is related to the DVML statement of intent. Just where we talk, a couple of points where it talks about manage DVML operations to be economically and environmentally sustainable. So my question would be around somebody who attends the stadium regularly, how does the ubiquitous use of single-use plastic cups for beer, for coffee, and for every other project you sell that comes in plastic, how does that fit into the concept of environmental sustainability? Because for me, when I leave the stadium, it's plastic, 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 it's like a plastic wasteland. So it would be good maybe to see a bit more effort and leadership emanating from one of our major and iconic events, the stadium. Thoughts?
Fair feedback, and we'll take that. I know they are working on initiatives, and it's a balance between availability and economic availability and dealing with their contractors, but it's certainly been mentioned in some of their work streams, so we'll include an update in the workshop on that.
We've got to get some real traction on that. And also going backwards a bit, also one of the goals is to be recognised as a positive contributor to the community. And again, it goes to the woeful standard of food products that are sold in the stadium, particularly kids. And I just think in the context of New Zealand being the third most obese nation in the OECD, a bit more effort from us to be leaders in that sector would be appreciated. And one final thing, I hate to be down on people, it's not really my personality to do that. I was a little bit disappointed on the report provided from Dunedin Railways. I just think it was a poor report and was pretty much a tick box exercise for me in the context of the other reports, which I thought were rather good actually, so just think that's worth noting.
Councillor Hurdan.
Thank you. Yes, I just sort of go back. That point I was raising before was on page 78, so a restriction on share issues, point 4.3. The board may not issue shares to any person other than the council without prior shareholder approval.
Excuse me, Karen.
Yes.
That item has been removed from the agenda. We're doing number 9.
Oh, right, okay.
And all the second range of papers is what's relating to, so yeah.
Right.
Sorry for that.
But is that still the case? Right. Have we got anyone else who has shares apart for the government and the council?
OETT and the rail.
OETT and the rail. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Happy to move.
Happy to move. The Mayor. Happy to second. I can hear it over here, but I can see it over there. So, but I'll take Doug. Councillor Hall, sorry. Any discussion? Would you like to speak to that? Any other speakers? I'm happy to say nothing. Put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. And we'll see you on the 31st. Item 11. Item 10 has been withdrawn. So item 11 is notification of chair. Any items that anyone needs notified against or about? If that's the case, I'll close the meeting at 1:45. Thank you very much for your time. We'll take 5 minutes before the next meeting. And you can have Mr. Staines in the chair.